Good evening, everybody. Let's try that again. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
You've been fed, you've had dinner. I'm waiting for coffee, but we're doing well. So, thank you. AT is a lawyer, so he is trained to make people look and feel good, so I wouldn't believe everything he says. Only the good things. So, I couldn't think of a better way to begin my remarks than by acknowledging this exceptional individual. For many of us in our community, AT is a brother. He is an older brother. A lot of our parents came to this country with no understanding of the culture, the language, the customs, the expectations put upon you. And so while our parents had to navigate a brand new culture on their own, they were also raising us, and we were concurrently navigating this brand new culture. And there were some times when it was hard. You know, you didn't really have anybody to tell you where to go or which direction to take. And that could be challenging sometimes. You know, we've had young men in our community who have gone in and out of the criminal justice system more times than I can count. And that's a challenge. However, moving forward, our younger siblings and the generations yet to come will have people like him to look at and think about and say, I want to become a better student. I want to become a better professional. I want to become a better human being. I want to become a better man. How do I do that? And they can look at people like AT, and he'll give them that guidance that some of us weren't really able to get as children. So it is such an honor to be here with you today at Belmont Hill. It's not my first time here. I've come for graduations, I've come for open houses, but it is always a pleasure to be on this beautiful campus. And I want to thank Caleb Collins, my fellow Cambridge former resident of Cambridge, but fellow Canterbridgean. I'm not entirely sure why you decided to invite a recovering politician to address you tonight, but I'm going to do my best to exceed your expectations, if not at least meet them. Like me, Caleb is from Cambridge. We grew up in the same neighborhood, the Coast. And when I first met him, we did the whole who do you know game and realized that we had a lot of friends and neighbors in common. And so it's great to see such a fine brother working at this institution of excellence. Greg, congratulations on your 9th appointment as the head of school. I've had the honor of sitting next to him this entire evening and talking about a variety of things. And my only hope is that the men who come out of this school are as well-rounded in the academics, in the arts, and as human beings as you are. And I hope that as head of school, you will be able to instill these values in them that you so wonderfully, eloquently shared with us tonight. My only request is that my honorarium for tonight is going to be that you teach me how to play the saxophone. When Greg was hired, one of the things he spoke about, and he includes this in his online welcoming letter, and I quote, is that he wants to ensure that this school remains forward-thinking in terms of best practices for boys' education in a global context of unprecedented opportunity and change. And I think that so eloquently describes who our honoree is tonight. Gretchen, your demonstrated life commitment to opening this world, this vast world that Greg talks about in his letter, is phenomenal. Can I hug you? So I grew up with a single mother, and one of the things that I really appreciated about my mom is, despite no matter what our socioeconomic condition was, she insisted that we traveled. You know, we went as far as Oregon to the west, as far as Ethiopia to the east, and she made a point to ensure that her son got a chance to see the world. And the relationships that I formed, whether they were temporarily, you know, making friends with a flight attendant on a 2-hour flight somewhere, or permanently, these relationships have helped inform the man I am today. And, you know, the scholarship that you have at Spelman College, opening the doors to young black women, irrespective of your racial privilege, irrespective of your socioeconomic status, opening the world up to women and students through your work at IES is amazing. I only think it's interesting. Life goes full circle when you are now working at the same nonprofit organization that opened the doors of the world to you. So again, I just want to congratulate you. I understand that Ethiopia is on your bucket list of countries to visit. And if and when you do make that visit, I will happily curate your itinerary for you. So I think the thing that impresses me the most about Belmont Hill is your mission statement. You exist to develop men of good character. You don't exist to develop the future leaders of America. You don't exist to develop men, but men of good character. That is so fitting, particularly in the times that we live in, that a school like this produces men of very good character. When Rick Melvoin was hired as the head of school, he was asked by the panel what his thoughts were about critical social issues such as homophobia, gender, and sexual orientation. He remarked that Belmont Hill would have to think about what it means to be an all-boys school, and that thoughtful consideration was needed for issues of gender and sexuality. And I'm quoting him here. Our society, the society that surrounds the school, is full of difficult issues, and part of our responsibility is to address these in a responsible way so that the students are prepared to go out into the world. As a school, I believe that it is incumbent upon you to ensure that the men you send out into our society are well prepared to engage the world beyond Belmont and beyond Massachusetts. And this brings me to what I want to speak to you about tonight. I want to talk to you about beliefs. What do you believe in? For whom do you fight? What is your calling? I want to tell you a story about a turning point in my life, my first major aha moment. When I was a child, I had these dreams of becoming a commercial airline pilot. I was obsessed with airplanes. I was obsessed with flight. I still am. Every time I'm in an airport, I'm like a kid in a candy store, looking at every plane, taking photos, and talking to the pilots. But as an 8th grade student, I quickly learned that I had a different calling. I had returned to Cambridge from a summer vacation in my native Ethiopia when one afternoon I was watching an episode on Oprah about Ethiopia. This was in 2004. Oprah's guest was Dr. Catherine Hamlin. She is an Australian gynecologist who has committed over 6 decades of her life to the women of Ethiopia. She and her late husband, Reginald, also a gynecologist, moved to Ethiopia after they were called to serve. They arrived in a country that had no maternal health resources. If you were pregnant in Ethiopia in the 1950s, the message was simply good luck. Catherine and Reginald established a midwifery training program at a local government hospital in Addis Ababa, the capital city. What was supposed to be a short-term assignment in Ethiopia turned into a lifelong calling when they learned about a childbirth injury called obstetric fistula. It's a horrific, horrific injury that no women in this world should go through. If you're unfamiliar with obstetric fistula, you're not alone. It's a silent issue. About 2 million women throughout the world suffer in silence because of untreated obstetric fistulas. And precisely because it is a women's issue in the developing world, no one cares about it. As I learned about the untold horrors these women face in countries like Ethiopia, I also learned about the opportunity for treatment, the opportunity to restore dignity. I became compelled to act. This was my aha moment. My purpose in life was not to fly airplanes, although I hope one day I will be able to. My purpose in life was public service. I grew up in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and one of my favorite Bible verses is Galatians chapter 5, verse 13. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. Scripture teaches us to not only use our freedoms, our privileges, to serve one another, but to do so humbly in love. Scripture also underscores the common sense of humanity that is enshrined in Belmont Hill's mission statement. Public service is the undying, burning, impatient, loving desire to serve others, to commit yourself to others with limitless compassion, and to do so humbly in love. My rights end when yours end. My freedoms end when yours end. I am because you are. This is the African philosophy of Ubuntu. This is the same philosophy that propelled rebels like Nelson Mandela to go out and change the world. As an 8th grader, I organized a group of 13 young Ethiopian Americans in the greater Boston area, and we raised funds to sponsor the surgeries of 11 women at the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital that Catherine and Reginald founded in 1974. This was incredible. We had no leadership experience. We didn't know what we were doing. Our first event was a total failure. We didn't invite anybody. We thought that by securing an auditorium, it was at the Martin Luther King Jr. School in Cambridge. We thought by securing an auditorium that somehow, 100 or 200 people would show up. Now the funny thing is, some of us didn't even invite our parents, and so they didn't even show up. Despite this initial failure, we sold a ton of candy, t-shirts, we sold raffle tickets. We even held a benefit event where in one night we raised over $4,000. And we were guided by our belief that women's rights are human rights. It's simple. What impacts women impacts us all. Not because those women are someone's daughter, mother, aunt, or sister, but because they are human beings. I have never heard anyone to say that we must respect men because they're someone's son, father, uncle, or brother. This was a pivotal year for me. It's when I learned that I have a voice. The enduring commitment of the Doctors Hamlin to the women of Ethiopia inspired me. It revealed to me my vocation. The word vocation, now I know we have a Latin expert in the room, so I'm not going to try to butcher it. The word vocation in its Latin roots means to be called. And for me, I saw this as a spiritual summons, a sort of call to arms to serve. In his book, Wishful Thinking, A Seeker's ABC, author Frederick Buechner correctly states that the place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. That place, that intersection, is vocation. My deep gladness is serving others. And in this instance, the world's deep hunger was maternal health. I was moved to act. I believe that every woman, regardless of where she is, regardless of what she believes in, has the right to safe childbirth. Men, I'm looking at all the men in the room because there's a lot of men here, we ought to be feminists. It's not enough to be allies. We ought to be co-conspirators. We ought to lead this fight for women's equality. A problem doesn't have to be your problem for it to be worth solving. In fact, the hallmark of a true public servant is when you take on an issue that has absolutely nothing to do with you. Since there are students in the audience, I do want to remind you that your age should never limit the voice that you have and the power that's in your voice. When I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school, much like your boys, I led the student campaign in the Cambridge Public Schools to recognize a Muslim holiday on our official calendar. We became the first public school district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to do so. Not because I'm Muslim, but because it mattered. Again, I am because you are. So I ask you again, what do you believe in? For whom do you fight? What is your calling? I'm encouraged by Belmont Hill's tradition of sending into this world generations of young men who are thoughtful and informed. I know many of these men. One of them is sitting right there. I look up to him. I know that in our current political climate, it's very easy to lose hope. But your motto speaks to me in a very powerful way. Do our actions as a society suggest we have foresight? Are we unapologetically zealous for equity and justice? What or whom are we loyal to? I ran for city council in Cambridge last year to ensure that no one is left behind in any of our 13 neighborhoods. I ran because I believed then, as I still do today, that together we can build an inclusive Cambridge, one where everyone is afforded the same opportunities to thrive, and a city where all residents are actual stakeholders. Despite our relative prosperity as a city, and I know we're home to Harvard, MIT, Kendall Square, we still have an underbelly of issues that we refuse to address. I argued that affordable housing and economic inequality are the biggest issues in Cambridge. I believe that much of the issues that everyday Americans face today can be addressed through policy changes that create greater social and economic mobility. 13% of our families with children in Cambridge live in poverty. When you look at single mothers, that number goes to 1/3 of our families that are headed by single mother households that live in poverty. This is unacceptable. 78% of our working class families struggle to pay rent. This is unacceptable. And in a city of our vast resources, 500 residents are chronically homeless. This is unacceptable. 30% of our public housing residents lack access to the internet. This is unacceptable. I felt then, as I still do now, that while we are growing and thriving as a city, we're leaving some neighborhoods and some people behind. Of course, this isn't the image that people have of Cambridge. We are known affectionately as the People's Republic of Cambridge because of our progressive policies. Our campaign developed a broad progressive agenda for Cambridge, and we engaged residents in a grassroots operation. I even got my busy lawyer cousin to show up and canvass a few times. We believe in 100% internet access for all Cambridge residents, so we fought for a municipal broadband network. We believe in providing every child the opportunity to compete in the innovation economy, so we fought for an integrated computer science for all initiative. We believe in offering entrepreneurs the access and information and resources that they need to thrive, so we fought for a small business resource center. We believe in housing for all, and housing that creates pathways to home ownership so that our families can build wealth. So we fought for greater investments in affordable housing. However, as you all know, if you're not in the room, you need someone in the room that is banging their fist on the table advocating for you. There's something clearly wrong in our country, the richest in the history of the world, when you have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to be considered low income. Be it in local, state, or federal government, an election at its core is a social contract. We are reminded quite often that elections have consequences. We are reminded quite often that the very values that make this country extraordinary are under attack. We are reminded quite often that some people just aren't welcome. I find that to be extremely unacceptable. It's not enough to tolerate diversity. We must celebrate the ways in which we differ. We all know that. That's why we're here tonight at this 11th annual dinner. And that's the beauty of our extraordinary country. This is a country of immigrants and refugees. This is a country of rejects. This is a country where everyone belongs. Ours is a country that welcomed and took care of my mother and me in 1995. Ours is a country where people will literally do whatever it takes to get to, even if that means death or imprisonment. That's how blessed of a country we are. So abundant is our blessing that people will give it their all just to arrive on our shores with nothing but the money in their pockets and the clothes on their backs. Diversity and inclusion, I know for you and for me, are not some fancy words that we write about in some annual report that we send off to people. From Belmont Hill to Capitol Hill, there's clear evidence that bringing people together from diverse backgrounds will lead to new ideas and new solutions that are going to tackle our everyday problems. And just as important as it is for us men to be co-conspirators in the fight for gender equity, those of you white allies in this room must be co-conspirators in the fight for racial equity. This country will be the most inclusive place to live if we ask for it, if we demand for it. And they say a rising tide lifts all boats. I believe we can be that tide. I believe that we can go out and make some good trouble. Despite the horrors in our current national political climate, despite all the division and unrest, despite the childlike bickering that goes on in this country, I've never been more inspired, precisely because we've seen darker days. The days that Gretchen spoke about. We've seen those days. And it's why I ran for office. It's why I spend every single day finding other people to run for office and incessantly asking them to do so. When you have a personal mission statement such as service to others before self, you cannot wait to be called. We must build coalitions and lift each other. Together we can realize our highest aspirations. We have a generational responsibility to leave this planet and to leave our society better, more whole than we found it. But it starts with defining your beliefs. So I will ask you again, what do you believe in? For whom do you fight? And what is your calling? Thank you.